Mahalo, Kanoi. So because we're going to be talking about Aina and setting a Kahua, we want to just start with a pule. So I'm going to ask Carolyn to open us up.
He pule kako. Heavenly Father, Kaʻakua manaloa. We come and with humility in our hearts, Father God, gathered here today, ultimately, Father God, to serve you and to serve you well. We ask for your blessing upon this panel, Father God, and the conversations and the words that will come forth, Lord, for we know words are powerful. We ask you for your grace and mercy, Father God, as a community, as we walk through this season together, and we pray, Father, your continued comfort and strength and support for the community of Lahaina and Kula and Makawao and all of the communities that have been affected this past year recently by these fires, Lord. We ask, Father God, that as this nourishing rain falls and heals and nourishes the land, Father God, that your grace would also fall upon us, Father God, and bring forth goodwill and good works for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Mahalo, Carolyn. Mahalo to all of you for joining us. Mahalo to this beautiful ua that's falling and keeping us cool. In this session today, I want to first just go around and have each of these wonderful wahine introduce themselves to you. And I'll start with our Lahaina ladies first.
Hello, Kakahiaka. My name is Carolyn Auweloa, better known as Carolyn Wong by the folks from Lahaina. I'm very honored to be here. I flew in this morning from the Big Island, but I was born and raised in Lahaina, and Lahaina is very much part of who I am. My day job, I work for USDA, but I'm here in a capacity to talk about the Lahaina Community Land Trust.
Mahalo, Carolyn. Councilmember Tamara Paltin.
Aloha mai kako. My name is Tamara Paltin, and I'm actually neighbors to Carolyn, where she lived in Lahaina, in Napili. My day job, I work for the Maui County Council Residency District of West Maui. Prior to that, I was an ocean safety officer out of DT Fleming's for about 20 years.
Aloha, I'm Reyna Ramolete Hayashi. I was born and raised in Kapalama on Oahu. I'm here as the Aloha Aina project manager with the Trust for Public Land. We are a nonprofit land conservation organization, and our mission is to protect land for people. We've partnered with communities across Hawaii since 1979 and protected over 77,000 acres and 49 special wahipana across our islands. And we're just so honored to be here today to really listen and learn from our Lahaina leaders.
Thank you, Reyna. So Uncle Archie started us off talking about a sale plan, and what we want to do is make sure that our community here has the tools, all of the tools that the Land Trust community brings to help in guiding that sale plan, so that the Lahaina community, with support from everyone else, can choose what tools you want to use as you repair the cherished va'a that is Lahaina. And so I want to start with Reyna, and can you just share with everyone what is a land trust? And then second, who are the land trusts that are in Hawaii now?
Sure. So a land trust is typically a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to protecting and conserving land permanently. And they can do that for a number of different reasons. A lot of land trusts do buy and own land and real property interests, and that includes conservation easements, which if people have questions about that, we can talk about that a little more later. But a conservation easement is basically a legal agreement between a landowner and typically a land trust or a government agency that restricts land for certain conservation purposes. It's a voluntary legal agreement. And and it serves that purpose. And land trusts also use tools like deed restrictions, which imposes certain restrictions on the actual deed of a property to protect it for certain purposes. In Hawaii, we have many different land trusts, and I hope that I don't forget anybody, but so Trust for Public Land, we're actually a national nonprofit. Like I said, we've been doing work in Hawaii since 1979. We're a little bit unique in that we actually are really more of a partnership organization. We are a facilitator and an intermediary. So we actually don't buy land to own it, but we do help other nonprofits and organizations, county and state agencies, OHA, for example, buy and protect land for different purposes. So we're really an intermediary. But there's Hawaii Land Trust, which has several preserves on Maui and also across the islands. On Oahu, there's North Shore Community Land Trust. There's Molokai Land Trust. Who else am I forgetting? There's Kipukakuleana, who we have, and all of these land trusts we do partner with. A lot of times they, as a local or community-based land trust, may not have the resources to do a lot of the raising the public funds or real estate due diligence that's necessary to do land conservation work. So a lot of times we do partner with these local land trusts. So Kipukakuleana, which is on Kauai, is really focused on kuleana lands and helping to keep our kuleana ʻohana on their lands. There's also a newly formed Kulaiwi Land Trust, which I think is still perhaps figuring out where there are gaps. But I think their role is really specifically dedicated to returning Hawaiian lands to Hawaiian people. Who else am I forgetting, Laura?
TNC is actually a land trust too, a national land trust. And then there's so many nonprofits, many on Maui, right? Keauhali'i, Kipuhulu ʻohana, so many, even just in this region that are have a lot of the functions of land trusts and that they're dedicated to Malama Aina. Some are very place-based to a certain region. And then Hawaii is unique too because we have our Ali'i trusts, which hold that land in trust for the people according to their mission. And then we have, I'm always reminded that Kaho'olawe is also held in trust for our lahui under the Kaho'olawe Island Reserve Commission. So many different ways to hold those lands for people, for Aina, for communities. Thank you so much, Reyna. And do you want to add anything else? Okay. And so there are land trusts for conservation, and then there are land trusts for community that often involve a housing component. And so I want to turn it over to Carolyn to share with us what is a community land trust.
Disclaimer, I don't pretend to be an expert on this subject. I'm a student, totally. But basically, community-based land trusts are land trusts based in the community. They're nonprofits generally that are governed by a board of directors that are comprised of the community that they're there to serve. These nonprofits, like Reyna just explained, can be land trusts that acquire and hold property and govern the use of that property based on the objectives and intentions of the trusts that are defined by the community. That's essentially a community-based land trust is led and managed and used for the benefit of the community.
Thank you, Carolyn. We're going to go around now. Thank you for just kind of introducing yourselves and also the general concept of land trust. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into your own kuleana that you've taken up for Lahaina in particular. or what tools and knowledge that you can bring to kind of lay it all out for the Lahaina community as we all develop that sale plan together and create that strong foundation together. So, Carolyn, I'll come right back to you.
Okay. That was a long question, but I think I know what I'm supposed to say. So my background is in agriculture. The agency I work for is a Natural Resources Conservation Service, and our whole thing, my career has been helping people help the land. I have a little bit of experience and exposure to easements. We use them in my work, and when it came to, well, let me just start with the elephant in the room. When the fire happened, I live on the Big Island now. I've lived on the Big Island since I finished college, and my job, I'm able to serve the community, the state of Hawaii from there. When the reports of the fire came out, I was at home and wrecked, to put it lightly. Could not believe what was happening. So afraid for my family. Fast forward, jumped into action to do whatever I could figure out, which was what everybody was doing, right? Getting stuff to send to people that I knew needed. My brothers, Kaipo and Peter Kekona, and they were going back and forth to Lahaina, getting in every day to take water and fuel and whatever. So loaded up a 20-foot container and was waiting at the airport when I was just spinning on so many things, right? So many immediate needs, but also very much concerned with the realities of people that lost everything, and how in the world would we move forward from here? How financially could my classmates, my aunties, my cousins, my neighbors, people that I grew up with that literally had the ground ripped out from under them, how would they be able to go forward, and how do we avoid losing people and losing lands and losing the character of Lahaina was really my concern. And I grew up in Lahaina, and the Lahaina I grew up in changed a long time ago. A lot of parts about it. It's hard to see. It was hard to wrestle with the realities of the economics and the things that drive Hawaii today, and it's frustrating. And as I sat there kind of mulling this over and thinking about it, I started to think about, like, why does it have to be this way? Why does the biggest dollar always have to have the most word, the most say and stuff? Why can't we figure out a better way? How can we use the tools that are available to us now and make them available for Lahaina? I was thinking about, older people that we don't know how long it's going to be able to rebuild Lahaina, and what if they can't afford to stay around and wait? What if they have a child like me on another island or on the continent that they could go and live with, but they might need funds to live there comfortably, but they love Lahaina, and there might not be another local family that can afford to purchase their land right now. Like, everybody's in such a rebuild stage. So that's where the ideas came from. And I said, what if we made a land trust? There's these things called land trusts, and they can own property, and they can protect it for why can't we do one to protect the Lahaina for the community of Lahaina, so we can keep Lahaina, the Lahaina we know and love, where we have local people that can afford to live here? How do we fight back against gentrification and put the tools in place so that people have an option? That was really kind of where it started. So idea kind of germinated in my head at the airport, and I land, and my brother is exhausted, and it's 10 o'clock at night or something crazy because Mokulele was delayed, and he picks me up, and we're driving home, and I'm just chewing his ear, telling him about this idea, and he's like, that's a good idea. We need to do something like that. I got somebody you should talk to. And that's how this conversation got started. I met Autumn, and we just clicked, and the fireworks went off, and then I talked story with Tamara, and tons of people just on a one-on-one basis, just starting to put it out there with the community. What do you guys think about an idea like this? Do you think this would be good for Lahaina? Do you see any issues with this? And a few concerns were brought up, which we really appreciated, because there were things we weren't thinking about initially, and it started really good conversations for how can we make sure that we are guarding, and doing this in a responsible way to ensure that the actual intent and the heart at which this is coming from is met. And so that's kind of how this got started. And now I'm sitting up here today because we filed to form a nonprofit called the Lahaina Community Land Trust, and I am here holding this space to make sure it gets done. And this awesome hammer over here too, she's gone along with me as I've drug her down this path, but we just really believe in this. We believe that people will care enough about Lahaina that if we can make a reasonable option and alternative, that this might be a help for some people that find themselves having to make a difficult decision. And it doesn't mean that, the possibilities really are endless. We have done lots of homework since the fire, and we've talked with the existing land trusts, many of them. We've talked with tribal-based land trusts on the mainland to learn how they do it. We've talked with other or nonprofits that specialize in this kind of stuff, and they've given us lots of really good information and guidance. And so, we're just trying to do our best to understand how this works and how do we build a land trust that's going to really meet the needs of Lahaina, and most importantly, get it controlled and managed by the people that have their best interests for Lahaina truly. And I really believe that's going to be people that are of Lahaina, that not necessarily just lineal descendants, but even multi-generational people. There's many of us. We are a beautiful mixed bag of different cultures and people, and we're not looking to be exclusive in any way, unless you're a speculator just trying to make money off of Lahaina. Then we're excluding you. But anybody else, that just loves Lahaina for what Lahaina is, that's what we're here to serve. That's what the Community Land Trust is intended to do. There's so many details to work out. I don't have all the answers today, but that's it in a nutshell, a big nutshell.
Mahalo, Carolyn. So Tamara, you got the call from Carolyn. Okay, we're doing this. We're putting together the Lahaina Community Land Trust. Do you want to just share a little bit about your kuleana and what you envision, what you see being needed?
Sure. When Carolyn showed me the paperwork and the points of a community land trust, I had 1,000 other things on my mind, and we were really just in survival and reaction mode still. But more and more people were coming to me, and with the whole town of Lahaina affected, we all experienced the same thing, but not everybody was in the same canoe, basically. The challenge that a lot of people were facing, especially homeowners, whether they had mortgages or took out a home equity loan or a second mortgage, is now that they're faced with, they don't want to lose their land, so they're trying to still pay their mortgage on a place where they can no longer live. And then as every couple days, people have to check in with the Red Cross looking for a place where that they can rent. Now they're faced with trying to pay their mortgage and pay a rent, which both of them are unattainable, especially if you lost your job or your business in the town that you lived in. So it's really a bleak situation for a lot of homeowners. And so we were kind of thinking about it. There's also people that had this experience of trying to get out of Lahaina while the fire was on, and they don't see themselves moving back, but they still love Lahaina. And in some of the areas, it's such a tight-knit community. People know who lived in that house for generations. They'll still call it like, oh, that's so-and-so's house, long after they moved away. And some of the concerns people brought to me was like, my mom doesn't want to go back, but we don't want to be known as a sellout. We don't want people to say that used to be so-and-so's house. And so as Carolyn was filling me in, and as Autumn was doing all the research, we kind of thought of it as like, oh, maybe people can sell in instead of sell out, or there could be other solutions where, you know, however long it takes to rebuild, maybe the land trust could buy an easement for a set amount of time so that, you know, we can give families a reasonable amount of money in their pocket where they can live their lives for 3-5 years, and then the easement is over and they come back and we're like, here's your land, you know? And right now we're focusing kind of on the housing portion of it because that's top of mind. We have like 6,800 people scattered throughout 32 different hotels, and so that's a pressing need. Those people are still in survival, having to move a lot. It's hard to even look for a job. It's hard to have your kids. We got Kula Kaiapuni o Lahaina over here. They've been having school at Hanaka'o Beach Park because they don't feel safe going back to the campuses. So there's so much thing in flux that people just aren't equipped to handle all the things. And so we thought for at least getting this started, for incorporating the articles, making the memorandum of understanding, we can get it started. My goal is not to be the president of Lahaina Community Land Trust as they take steps, because it could, you know, if people donate money, it could be a conflict of interest. I may have to recuse myself. But just to get things started and give people hope, Autumn, who's been doing a lot of sleuthing for us, she went to speak to the Realtors Association, and there was big interest because a lot of people were trying to sell, but we don't want to change the character of our town. So we kind of been thinking a little bit along the lines of Nahale o Maui, which is an affordable community land trust, which we'd like to do, like let people have a shared equity in it. But our main focus is not just affordability, but keeping the character of our community, keeping our neighbors, our friends, all the families we knew. If they want to come back when it's time to rebuild, we want to be there for them. We want to hold space, hold land, and bring those families back and install them in these positions. It's not my goal to run it forever. I'm hoping that other people will step up, and we can just keep the community strong in that way. And really, before we start to rebuild the infrastructure, rebuild the structures, I kind of saw this as a way to rebuild our community first. And we're definitely learning as it goes along. And so happy to have people like Reyna and Laura, like kind of, you know, telling us some stuff. Super thankful for Autumn for, you know, visiting all these different types of land trusts across the continent and in tribes and things like that. So that's kind of what we're up against right now.
Thank you, Tamara. I wonder, yes, mahalo. Absolutely.
I just wanted to add to what Tamara was saying, you know, like this, to try to put something like this together in just a few short months is crazy. And literally, like, we could never have done this without the helping hands of really a lot of people. A lot of organizations have reached out, have shared resources, connections, put us in touch with people, and I can't say enough about Autumn, too, because she, you know, all of us are going through, well, Tamara is in the hot seat in a lot of ways, and my family, but Tamara was just the steady wind that kept the wind in our sails to keep this va'a moving and get us to where we are today. So that woman over there deserves a lot of credit and a lot of appreciation. Thank you, Autumn. she got us talking to everybody. I mean, we got to talk story with the Houston Land Trust, who also was born out of a disaster. We learned tons from those guys. I mean, they pointed stuff out that we did not even realize was going to be things that we'd have to start to work solutions towards. And she's never-ending source of creativity. And so really appreciate all of her support. And again, all of the various, I'm not even going to try to name them all because I know I'm going to forget them. But I'm going to forget too many. But tons of organizations have reached out to just kāko'o and support this idea and encourage us that this is a good thing. And a lot of people from the community, you know, when we bring it to them, it was so hard because so many people were just reeling from the more immediate concerns, right? But it was just a gentle planting of a seed to say, hey, you know, this is what we're thinking, this is our intent, what do you think? Would you be supportive? Do you have concerns? Those are really the only answers that we were asking for, recognizing that there's so much more more work that has to be done. But we are thinking very creatively, like Tamara was explaining, you know, like maybe there's families that need to sell, but maybe in 5 years we'll be in a position to actually take ownership back. And we want to be able to be that. Maybe we're just a land bank for a little while for a family that just needs that space and that time to recover, that we can sell it back to them, you know, at a fair, reasonable price. Like just protecting it from the inflationary pressures of, you know, speculative buyers that we're all too familiar with. And all of the other effects that kind of action has on a community, yeah? People come in and they buy them for big money and they build these gigantic houses, and next thing you know, maybe you didn't sell your land, but maybe your property tax is now unaffordable. You know, there's all kinds of things. And the other thing that has been really inspiring is looking at what other land trusts do for their communities. Like some of them are pivotal at just bringing programs or resources or information like homeownership workshops or specific examples of how other communities have done this or that in order to help people stay on their lands, you know, without even going through the land trust. And that's all fair game. Like that's all the kind of stuff that we want to see. Again, our whole intent is to help Lahaina keep the character of Lahaina, and not see our people get driven out, but also be sensitive to the needs that some of our community members might have and some of the difficult decisions that they might have to make. But we want it to be an option where if they have to make that decision and if they have to sell and leave, that they can look back with pride, that they can come home feeling good and revisit that place, and maybe their ʻohana is the family that gets to occupy that, and they can afford to. You know, they can afford to come and build a reasonable house. And so anyway, I can go on and on, but I just wanted to add that because Tamara, she did a great job, and I really wanted to give kudos to Autumn. Thanks.
Mahalo, Carolyn. So every land trust, just like you folks, usually starts with a couple very dedicated people who see something wrong or a need that needs to be filled, and they're looking around and it's you, right? that's who it is. So, and even right down the coast at Waihe'e started that way. Nope, not going to be a golf course. We want something different for our community. We can look all around and we have that. And so I'm also seeing Kulakaiopuni o Lahaina here, and I want to go to Reyna and just ask you, with Aloha Aina central to your work, I know we're talking about the immediate need of housing with Lahaina Community Land Trust, but are there ways that housing or schools or these critical needs can also be brought in with conservation and protection of our biocultural resources?
Yeah, that's a really big question, and I feel like, you know, Lahaina is going to be leading the way on the answers to that, and just so inspired by all of the work that you guys are putting in to think through these really systems change solutions for your community. Yeah, so our Aloha Aina program, we specifically focus on protecting lands that are important to Hawaiian communities and then returning those lands to Hawaiian organizations, a lot of times nonprofits, sometimes OHA. You know, and I think in the context of housing, like sometimes it comes up when there's already a house on the land. So, for example, we worked on Hakipu'ulo'i on Oahu, and there was already the lineal descendants of that kuleana were working for decades to protect it against sale and development, and we worked a really long time to try and find a conservation solution. And Laura can jump in because she was, she started that project before I joined Trust for Public Land. And really the family together with the community decided let's try and buy this land and return it to the community through a nonprofit organization. But because there was urgency in terms of financial pressures on the owner and the family, Trust for Public Land actually stepped in and was a bridge owner. So we bought the property using a loan, held it temporarily while we worked with the community and advocated for public funding from our county Clean Water and Natural Lands Fund, which is a percentage of real estate tax goes into that fund to buy land for conservation, and then our state legacy land conservation fund, which is a percentage of real property conveyance taxes that goes into a fund for conservation. So we tapped both of those sources. We were awarded the funds, and we raised $1 million to protect this kuleana parcel, and then returned it to the community under Ho'ala Aina Kupono, which is a Kahana-based, Aina-based nonprofit organization. The descendant ʻohana still farms lo'i on the property, but also they welcome school and community groups to come learn about, biocultural restoration and land management. And just all of the ecosystem benefits that lo'i provide. And then Hawaii Land Trust holds a conservation easement with the city and county of Honolulu. What's unique about that parcel is that there was always a house on the property where the descendant ʻohana lived for a long time. It fell into disrepair, but what's unique about it is that the conservation easement and the deed preserves the potential for that house to be used as a caretaker house. So the logical fit to live in that home once it's restored is really the ʻohana that is farming and caring for the land. So it will be a caretaker / farm worker a house for that family to live in. So we have instances like that where we're protecting cultural resources, but oftentimes there's a residence already on the property. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question.
If I could just add on to that, right now the county is working on closing on a small parcel in Honokohau for Namamo o Honokohau, and Punana Leo is currently working out of Honokohau. Last year on the council, we were able to pass a managed retreat fund, which took in, I think, about 20% of the TAT. And so right now, after its first year, it has at least $12 million. And there's no definitive answer yet. It's going to have to be a big community discussion about how close to the ocean we rebuild. And so I don't want to come off as I know the answer. It's a big community discussion with hard decisions being made. But if that managed retreat fund could strategically purchase parcels close to the ocean that are culturally significant, and it doesn't need to be the Lahaina Community Land Trust. It could be a land trust that specializes in conservation, Hawaiian Islands Land Trust, Trust for Public Land, whomever. And kind of what I envision for our Kula Kaiapunis is right now they're looking for a physical space, a school. They're trying to raise money for those portable classrooms. But they're meeting out of Hanaka'o'o, and it's not a four-walled classroom. They can kilo, they can malama, and if we have a network throughout Lahaina, throughout the Pai'aina for those types of learning, I think there's you know, so much more to learn beyond the four walls of a classroom. And I think if we can combine that with the community land trust so that our community can stay in Lahaina, and then our keiki can have that physical classroom, but also have all of these spaces that they can always forever go to learn to take care of and pass it on from generation to generation, then that's kind of the vision I see for Lahaina. And not all of it needs to be purchased. A lot of it is owned by the state. King Kamehameha III Elementary Site, Pakala, and just the vision of how we malama those places and fold it into that network of special open spaces for Lahaina, shoreline spaces where a community can still go and practice and gather and things like that, because the way a lot of the shoreline was closed off before. So, you know, while this was certainly a tragedy that I would never want to happen to any other community, we have to also look at it now that we have no other choice as an opportunity to maintain that open space, or at least some corridors, you know, for not only our keiki, for the ecosystem, for the environment and everything. And eventually, I mean, when more people have more time and capacity to just fold it all into one big vision.
Amen.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time I do want to invite questions from the audience. There might be a QR code I can't see to use an app to ask a question, or we can just go the old school way as well, and you can shout it out, or there might be index cards that are coming around. So please do. Oh, yes, okay, we have one. Sure. So the question was about kind of the mechanics of the community land trust model. And I know there are multiple different community land trust models, but the particular question was if you could share about a little bit more about the possibility of having a sell-in option and then being able to sell out at a different time to maybe regain that land. And I know it's very much in the works, but anything you can give on the mechanics of
Sure.
community land trusts.
These are really just ideas right now that we're still trying to figure out, like, exactly what do we have to put in place for them to work. But one idea is like a buyback option. So let's say a community multi-generational family has a parcel. They just can't afford the mortgage and the living costs and everything, and they need to go back to Oahu for a little bit with some family, whatever. They want to sell their land to the land trust. The land trust could foreseeably purchase the land and offer a buyback period of whatever we choose, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, that if that family finds the means to come back to Lahaina, that property, maybe it could be held, and they could have like a first right of refusal. They could have an option, not really a first right of refusal, because it really wouldn't be for sale to anybody else, but just that family. And we want to be clear, like, we'd want to offer that to local families, not the investors that need to get out of their debt and they want to come and buy it back. Like, no, that's not really the point of the land trust. So we'd be very clear about that, but that's one option. We're also trying to see if there is a feasible way of selling like an easement that requires that the land always stay in ownership of the local family. So it can never be sold to like an outside investor. There's a lot of questions on that one. We don't know if there's actually a legal way to do it, but we're trying really hard to find a way. Because if that's the case, then let's say my parents sold the easement on their property, but they could sell it to any of us kids, or they could sell it to maybe one of our neighbors that they grew up with, or what we grew up with, or whatever, but they could never sell it to an investor from outside that's going to change it. Yeah, ideas, again, they're just ideas. They're just things that we're exploring, because with a conservation easement and title restrictions, there's things you can do that restrict what can be done with a property. And so we're trying to see if there's leeway in there to use that type of tool in this way that seeks to really just preserve the lands of Lahaina for local people. Now, that will limit the options for someone, you know? If they're ever sitting there and they're like, oh, well, I can sell it, but only to a local person, and so that kind of limits the value inflation, that's a real consideration for a family. So there's really, it's, don't take this the wrong way, but people really got to put their money where their mouth is in that case. So like, you know, like a lot of people can say, oh, I love Lahaina, I love, 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 but when it comes down to it, do you love it enough that you would make a choice like this? We're not necessarily trying to say we're going to offer pennies on the dollar, but there may always be a billionaire somewhere that might offer them way more than the land trust ever can. But if we can offer like a very fair and respectable purchase price, that's where we're trying to be. That's where we're trying to be. We got a long way to go.
The question is, what would happen with the lot in that buyback time?
That's a really good question, and I think it would have to be something that we would work out at the time of the purchase, like establish like, do you want this buyback period, and might just be part of the process that we go through in building out these properties. If that's indeed the direction it goes in, yeah. Ultimately, the decision for what a particular parcel would be used for would be at the discretion of the board of directors, and we're also envisioning that we would be guided by an advisory council of both Lahaina and non-Lahaina residents potentially, but the board of directors, we want them all to be held by Lahaina residents or people with strong Lahaina ties. So everything, it's a community-based land trust, so we want to be very transparent. We want to be very well networked in the community. We don't want any aspect of the community to feel like their interests are not represented. Again, that community that we're talking about. Yeah, thank you.
And I realize you folks are coming to speak as your paperwork is being reviewed. So a lot of these things are in the works, and it's pretty brave that you're coming out before it's all like, you know, figured out with down to the nitty-gritty details. Maybe just on the mechanics portion, we had mentioned easements, but Reyna, can you explain how there's a monetary value to an easement that could potentially be purchased by a land trust?
Yeah, so in the context of a conservation easement, or a lot of our conservation easements are actually more crafted like cultural easements. So generally, property in the Western sense of property has a lot of rights that are tied to it, right? As a private owner of property, you can develop up to whatever is allowed by the zoning. You can invite whomever you want to your property. You can do whatever you really want. That's the whole concept of private property, up to the limits of the law, right? In a conservation easement, the landowner is saying, I'm going to give up some of those rights. So I'm going to put restrictions on my land in perpetuity forever. And in the giving up of that right, you're giving up essentially value in the Western sense of the term, right? Your property has a value. And so the more rights you give up, and in the context of conservation, it's typically you're giving up rights to develop. So, you know, most of our land trusts are really focused on preserving cultural lands, you know, lands that have iwi kupuna or, you know, lo'ikalo terrace systems, awai, a lot of cultural sites. In terms of agriculture, you can have a lot of agricultural value. So if you're giving up the right to develop, you're essentially giving up value. And so an appraiser comes in and says, okay, because you're giving up the right to build, it's worth this much, right? And they put a number to it. and then you pay the landowner in exchange for giving up those development rights. That's just like an example of what would happen. And so we have conservation funds at every county in Hawaii. Trust for Public Land helped establish those funds, and then at the state level as well, that will pay a private property owner for giving up those development rights to preserve the land for cultural purposes, for agricultural purposes, for restoration of native habitat, for all these conservation values.
Yeah, and another, just to kick off of that, if the easement option doesn't work out, but let's say a family just is drowning under their mortgage and trying to keep their head above water is not working, and maybe they are open to considering the land trust will offer me X amount of dollars to sell my land into the land trust, but we could also offer that family the exclusive right to occupy that land for the next 100 years, whatever, right? And so in a sense, they've kind of sold, similar to the easement, just kind of different in that the title for the land will go to the land trust, but the ability for the family to occupy that land would be preserved. And so that might be a solution for a family. It might be like, what? That would eliminate all my debt. That would give us a cushion of money, the down payment to build our new hale, you know, and 100 years my family can live here. And then obviously, like, just like any, you know, these other entities that lease land for 100 years, we would have a plan in place for what are we going to do at the end of that 100 years, you know, and then if your family continues to want to occupy and you've been great tenants, of course, we would just renew the lease. Like, you know what I mean? That's how it could work. It's kind of fun to daydream about these things, but we got to also think about like the negative ways it could go. That's the harder part, and that's where we're going to need help. Autumn gave me a really good idea that if there's anybody that's like really jiving on this idea and really like, this is killer, I want to find out more about this, or maybe even be a part of this, come see me. I'm not going to just give my phone number out, but we'll pass around a list, and Autumn will collect your contact information, and we'll be happy to try to keep you updated, or see if, you know, maybe you have a special skill set you can offer to this process. And, you know, it's a Kaʻakua thing, so we're looking for help. We need paddlers for this wa'a. We need people with talented, you know, skills and gifts to offer. So we're very welcoming like that. We're not an exclusive group, but it's just we're the ones that stay up at night thinking about this. Thank you.
And maybe just to add on the mechanics question, sort of the simplest community land trust model is the community land trust owns the underlying land, and the ʻohana owns the structure, right? And so you have, for a lot of us, we have houses that aren't in the best shape, but because we're in Hawaii, the land is super valuable, right? It's all, unfortunately, speculative value. And so your, you know, $1 million lot, you might have a little tiny hale that has termites on your $1 million lot, right? And so if that becomes too much for your ʻohana to bear, one option could be to sell your underlying fee to the land trust. So the land trust, let's just say it's half-half, right? The underlying fee might be $500,000, maybe it's more like $800,000, and your actual structure's actually worth $200,000. And so the land trust could then raise money to purchase the underlying fee to hold it in trust for the community. But as Carolyn was saying, they really want to make sure that there's the opportunity for equity. So the ʻohana could still be there and have their hale if their hale is there. Or if not, then they would have that opportunity to potentially rebuild there. But the bulk of the money in many cases would be held by the land trust. And that's one way. Different land trusts do it many different ways. Some, like Carolyn was saying, might have a time period there with the hope that another family could come in with an affordable option as that family builds equity and capacity. And some, it's just, it is what it is. Your ʻohana is there, and that's the whole intent of the land trust, is for you to stay there. So thanks for those questions and your patience with all of us in just trying to figure out really the mechanics and the details. Yes.
I have a really quiet voice, so I'm finding this is more of like a mastermind. So it's not really a question, but it's more of a contribution of an idea to a developing plan. And I just would like to add, oh, Kalamai, can you guys hear me now? Okay. So what I was saying was I'm finding this to be more of a mastermind, so I wanted to take the opportunity to just share an idea that I think would be helpful to the developing plan. I'm Kayla, by the way. Aloha, everyone. I just wanted to add that in the event that someone has sold in, if there can be a process, a system that's created to identify kuleana ʻohana. So in the event that somebody decides that, you know, we don't want to come back, and they pass that period of time to buy back in, if we can create a system that identifies the ʻohana that belongs on that kuleana land, it'll give them an opportunity to find safety under the umbrella of the land trust, where they can exist and occupy in the kuleana lands and find affordability to actually be back on that aina. So I just wanted to contribute that idea, because I find that this is a great opportunity for people to come back home. And if, you know, the ʻohana that no longer can be there or no longer want to be there gives up that space, then the opportunity presents itself for them to return. And so I just wanted to share that and bring that forefront. And I think that's a unique opportunity. I'm not sure if other land trusts do that, but if we have a special committee or task force that's directed to focusing on that, I think that we can make a really big change, and especially in Lahaina, where it's really important to identify that we are Hawaii and that is our kingdom. Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Thank you for bringing that up. That is one of the first, that's the flavor of the feedback we got when we first started this. And many people feel that way, and we do too. So yes, so that's definitely something that we talk about often. As we are, literally the ink is still not dry on the paperwork, but as we're coming together and we're trying to involve, you know, and get the right people involved, we're trying to talk through what that can look like. How can we do it in a way that's pono and fair, and how do we do that? It's, you know, these kuleana land rights and people that have that tie to the land, especially if they're in a position to actually come and make a claim on it, you know, if there's not a clear title or whatever, I think we would cooperate with that process, obviously, but there's so much that could be in that realm, but ultimately our intention is that we would be cooperative and supportive in that way. Figuring out the minute details of exactly how it would work, it's still evolving. But thank you for bringing it up. Thank you.
Question.
Hi.
Can you grab the lands that the government played with and jam?
Okay, the question from Uncle, can you grab the lands that the government played with and jam?
It's our hope that we will be so successful and such a stellar example of what can be done when a community comes together and does the right thing, that the government will want to give us land that they haven't been doing a good job with.
Means unmerciful son. That's because they cut down Auweloa. They cut every ubu tree down because it was a pest to the newcomer. A fly they brought in by ship that made seeds. And they didn't have the manpower to clean it. Hawaiian, Hump Camp was a large Hawaiian village that walked down into that pond area. I'm sorry. I apologize over you, to all of you. Lahaina's name is Malu'ulolele. Lahaina means unmerciful son. That because you cut down every ulu tree, the fruit of a soul of a people. That pond that now is a baseball field, a tennis court, all kinds of people fighting for it, used to be a sacred pond with 3 islands. Kamehameha III did not like the palace across the street because it had an iron roof, tin roof. So in the rain, he ran across and went to those 3 places. Kamehameha's second and wife was buried there after they died in Europe. That's that kind of land. This is Lahaina. Lahaina is a sacred ground. It's not a commercial ground. 505 Front Street is a jinx, like 666 is in the Bible. These things are built on sacred ground to erase the people. Okay? So what is needed is there a system? The school, that's royal lands. The banyan tree is a royal pond. Now what does it mean to say royal? It means the king worked in that taro patch to prove that he fed his people. That's what that garden is. The man who planted the taro, who feeds is in fact in charge, not who swings us on.
Gotta hold it closer.
So that portion is never listened to. The Salvation Army truck right there, that property was seized by the army during the Second World War and then given as that it was theirs. That area, that little shopping center has a problem. The sacred pond for fish ran in from every place of the island by foot because you could not feed a chief a dead fish. It had to be killed by his chef. That consideration,
They cannot hear. You gotta
that pond now is flooding. It's flooding so badly that they have pumps throughout. They put the generator plant for the shopping center there. Now they got to put it on the surface because it's flooding. They are all old whispers that are getting louder and louder and louder. Lahaina Harbor got so big that every power boat, when it reached the gasoline line, blew up. Why is there that harbor? The streets to it are not safe. They're too small. So the banyan tree, the hotel, and the library belong to those sacred patches along a road called Alanui o Mo'i, the King's Way. There are things in there that have historically been overrun by plantation ideas and outside of peoples, new people with new ideas. Now they're saying we're special. The courthouse could be a place for law when there was no law, Hawaiian law. Then the first laws created by missionary, then created and it changed each form. No, it became a businessman's office, a retail shop on the bottom. Everything else that pays taxes is number one. Anything that is prayed for is just a whisper on the wind. That's the problem. So the question is, as you try to save homes, can you fit that area? Same thing with Honokahau. I own a house out there. Anyway, excuse me.
Mahalo, Uncle. Now we're getting to the heart of it, right? How do we incorporate this new Lahaina Community Land Trust, take the tools of the broader community, take the powers of government too, collaboration between community and government to look at the Vahikupuna of Lahaina, to look at the cultural sites of Lahaina and get a little bit zoomed out in the sale plan so that everything's working together. You want to share?
Okay, sure. You know, The county has a fund, a Hawaiian Cultural Restoration Fund, which is, we just recently voted to expand to include Pakala. So there is currently about $1.5 million in that fund to take care of Malu'ulu'olele area and across the street at Pakala. Part of the issue is the fund is generated from the parking lot right across by Salvation Army. And so there won't be money coming in, but if the community, the lineal descendants, everybody want to get together again and form that vision, you know, the Friends of Moku'ula was, and then not anymore. But it's just really waiting for the descendants, for the community, for everyone to form the vision again. Because right now there is maybe roughly 1.5 million there to take care of and restore it. And I know the DLNR did float an idea about expanding Lahaina Harbor on the King Kamehameha III Elementary School site. However, it's really the community of Lahaina and the feedback of what they want to see in respect to culturally, historically, what was there and restoration of that. So, I mean, anything is possible in this time when there is really not much left there. And to restore local omokuhinia, to restore Malu'ulu'olele, our county council listened to pretty much 10 hours of testimony that is what the community wants. It's just getting from point A to point B and how we do it, how we're going to get the water back, how we're going to properly archaeologist excavate the area to restore what it was. And so it is the vision that we heard as the county council, 10 hours of testimony at the West in late September. It's just how we get from point A to point B. And I know Carolyn said that if anyone wants to sign up their contact information with Autumn, I can put out my contact information for the county and I can forward the information if anyone wants to email that they want to be a part of it, be involved, or they have skills to contribute. My email is just tamara.paltin@mauicounty.us, TAMARAPALTIN, and I'll make sure your contact info gets to the Land Trust Hui.
Mahalo. So some questions that came in from the audience. What is your folks' timeline for Lahaina Community Land Trust? I know you filed your paperwork. We're waiting. You're fleshing out the details of the options that might be available for community. Do you have a goal time frame of when you might be ready to accept donations, or when the services of Lahaina Community Land Trust might be available to the Lahaina community?
As soon as possible. Hesitant to give a date because all kinds of things need to happen that we don't always have full control over, right? Like just doing our paperwork at DCCA hit a snag, so we're untying that snag right now. But we would like to get it available as soon as possible. We just know that there are so many families that are facing all kinds of uncertainty and all kinds of stress, and you know, we are not gonna push this on anybody either. But we're trying to just create an option and get us in a position where we can, you know, be a conduit to, because there's people that have asked that same question, like, when are you ready for donations? It's like, okay, like we want to do this right. We want to do this right. We want it to be transparent. We want to be accountable. And so some of that takes some time. So as soon as possible, I'm going to say hopefully by the beginning of the year, spring, if everything goes smoothly. Again, if we have any experts in the room that can kako in any way, that know how to do these kinds of things, talk to me. We could use the help. I do still have a day job and a family, and all of us do. We're volunteers doing this, and we do it after dinner, and we do it when I can take off early or whatever. But this is a big deal, and we think we may have found a person that we can hire to be responsible for certain tasks, but she's also a victim of the fire, and we're trying to be very gracious. But again, it's from this desire to make this truly a Lahaina-based entity. So.
Okay, one clarifying question. How do community-based land trusts continue to exist in relation to the rule against perpetuities, or are all of them considered charitable? We could just kind of collectively, we are all, I'll just answer, I guess. Yes, all of the land trusts are charitable. So they're all nonprofit organizations, at least the ones that we're talking about up here, both community land trusts and conservation land trusts. And so they don't have to expire after a certain period of time. And really their whole purpose, in many cases, is to continue in perpetuity for the land and for the community. Let's see. What is the role of local and state government? So, in this effort, I will.
Well, it just so happens that Tamara is a councilwoman and she's here in this board right now, but really none. Except like maybe in the future, again, we might approach them with a proposal or something like that, but they're not a part of this.
Right, of the Lahaina Community Land Trust effort, absolutely. Do you want to talk about outside of the Lahaina Community Land Trust, how you envision county partnering, and maybe I can add on the state side?
Okay, I just was thinking, because the county sets the property taxes, and so, for conservation land, it's set pretty low, but for what we're doing here, the council passed a bill, all these properties that or intends to pass a bill that all of these properties that got burnt down, that they would have a grace period on property taxes unless the land is sold, because if it's sold, you know what you're getting into as you buy the property. In my version of the bill to give a tax break, I tried to say, unless you sell it to a community land trust. I don't know if that's a conflict of interest, but it's really, we're trying to keep the land in local hands. So that was kind of my role, straddling two worlds.
Okay, and then I will try to answer as well. I think for local government, and I'll just speak on behalf of, in my current position at DLNR, government has and does have the power to purchase land, and in certain rare instances where there is a huge community need, there is also the power of condemnation. And so as we're trying to bring forward the land trust tools. Those are two tools that are possible to put on the table in sort of the thinking about different properties that Uncle in the front here brought up to us. So those are possibilities. In the session later today, I know my counterpart, Kaleo Manuel, and water commissioners will be talking about the role of water, and that absolutely is plays a role with government responsibility. And so I think we'll leave most of that topic of water to our later session. Yes. Okay. What would be the benefits of using the power of condemnation? And are there any negative consequences? So now I'm speaking a little bit out of turn, but really condemnation is really not used that much. So you see it a lot when Department of Transportation widens roads. So they have this determined bigger community need, right? The bigger community at large has a need of an expanded roadway. So sort of like critical infrastructure. And so in those rare instances, then they can condemn, they have to pay fair market value. There are consequences, right? You would have, in those instances, a lot of times, ʻohana are now separated from their lands. I think that would be the opposite of what we're trying to do here, but there are, in some instances when you have like a private business owned property and you're looking to condemn for that bigger community need, then you wouldn't necessarily have that displaced ʻohana, right? But you would have a business that would be compensated fair market value.
I have, a lot of times I try to ask the mayor's administration, like, if people can already get permits for their lands to start the process of rebuilding. And our Office of Recovery leader, Josiah, he says, if you build Lahaina, if everybody wants to go back to their lot and rebuild exactly as it was, then really nothing changes. The no evacuation route, the 2 small roads, the historic district, it'll all be the same, susceptible to the same challenges that we just experienced. And so, a lot of people say they want to build a more resilient Lahaina, which would have, standard size roads, sidewalks, pedestrian friendly, one way in, another way out, not the same way in and out. But then when you talk to folks, if they're willing, if their property was an exit, would they be willing to sell? And nobody's willing to sell. And so just throwing this out there as a brainstorm, because I feel like, it's a big community discussion that has to happen and a big brainstorming that needs to happen. But if there's families that say, it was too chaotic leaving, I don't want to come back. And it's in a place that is okay to rebuild. Maybe if this family is, their lot is blocking the exit, in that situation, we could possibly work with government where it says, we want to make this area an exit. This other family sold their land and they don't want to come back. Would you be willing to entertain a swap or something like that? Or, even if the roads don't become wider, like Dickinson is a very narrow road along a school, private school. If nobody's willing to give up an easement to make the roads wider, then maybe we develop a traffic flow pattern where it's one way and then you can have sidewalks too or something like that. But it's all something that the residents that are going to live in Lahaina needs to have a big conversation about. And I feel like all options should be on the table. If this lot would make a good exit, would you be willing to live here, here, or here, where other people have sold and it's part of this land bank, or anything like that? If you lived right on the ocean front, would you be willing to move back to this land over here and then make the whole ocean be a greenway and everybody can access it? Until we throw all the ideas out there, I think we can't really discredit any of the ideas and have a good solid discussion on it. And in that way, maybe the government could be a part of the conversation of just becoming safer and more resilient. Because this time it was a fire. Just a summer ago, we had that large south swell. Broke right through Mala Restaurant. Mala Restaurant survived the fire, but will they survive the next large south swell? So it's not only fire. There's so many more extreme weather conditions that are occurring: storm surge, high wind events, hurricanes, and things like that. So all of it needs to be taken into consideration because really the goal is not to have something like this, anything like this happen again.
And I'll just add, zooming way out, we definitely at DLNR have a responsibility for our watersheds, our forest reserves, making sure that those are healthy, that those are capturing rain. You know, streams in Lo'i are our original fire breaks, right? So supporting those traditional customary uses, supporting water in the stream for our native stream life, for our estuaries, all of those things are our kuleana as well as our communities and supporting that. Okay, so I have some more questions coming in. What groups are part of these discussions and how often are people meeting and how do people get involved in becoming a part of these discussions? So kind of a three-part question. What groups are meeting? What groups are you talking to?
Specifically the Lahaina Community Land Trust.
Yeah.
Let's see, we have connected with representatives from the Filipino community. We are pretty well networked in with the old like Kama'aina families from Lahaina. So that a lot of that has been one-on-one. Everybody knows my brother's father-in-law is Keamoku Kapu, so we've definitely talked story with him and that group. I believe we've reached out with Uncle Archie guys and had some conversations there.
And then what groups are you going to for assistance or? Yeah, both.
The other groups. Okay, this is what I didn't want to do, start naming because I know I'm going to forget.
Okay.
I haven't had enough coffee today, but I can think of a few. So Grounded Solutions is one from the mainland, but they're a nonprofit that this is what they do is they help to build capacity in communities for solutions like these. We've been talking story with Hawaii Community Foundation. We've been talking story with Autumn, help me out here. She's the other half of my brain this morning. What was that? Wait, let me get my notes. Oh yeah, the Waiat tribe in California. We talked story with them, but I'm trying to think. There was another.
And then while you're looking at that, for people wanting to plug in, you mentioned Autumn's going to be circulating a sign-up list.
Yep, it's right there on that table.
Okay, and I think you have flyers too.
I do.
You have some handouts.
Yep.
Are those the two ways for now that people can start to follow? We don't currently have a website up and running, right? That'll be in development.
I'll add that to the to-do list.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got a very simple flyer that just kind of provide some of the terminology regarding conversations like this and kind of like the need and the preliminary vision that we have. Other than that, the Lahaina Strong website? Oh yes, we've had conversations with folks out of Lahaina Strong, and oh gosh, it just flitted through my brain. Through the funders hui, there's been all kinds of different groups and people representing different groups through there that I don't have their names and information handy, but they've been tapping us and being very patient because they know like this is not just a simple thing, and that we are trying to be very conscientious to do it right and in a way that's accountable. So and for the record, we haven't received any donations to this point. Okay, so don't be worried that we're misusing money. Believe me, we're not. Thank you, CNHA, for flying me over here today.
Okay. Could a land trust limit visitor traffic or non-residents occupying a place for each day or have any effect on reducing the risks of coming in and out? Could a land trust limit visitor traffic? We'll just stop there.
Only to the properties they manage, I would imagine. Land trust really doesn't have any kind of authority.
of lands that are at risk, right? Anytime folks in your community sees lands at risk of sale, of subdivision, of development, please reach out to Trust for Public Land or any of the local land trusts to figure out what are some options, right? A lot of the projects that we've worked on over the years have come to us because the community has resisted sale, development, or subdivision of really important cultural lands. And they come to us, and what we try to do is negotiate with the landowner to sell for conservation, and we pay them to ensure that they get what they need out of the deal so that it can really become a win-win. And a lot of times it's really that community pressure and advocacy, fighting against subdivision, fighting against sale, that brings the landowner to the table to say, you know what, I think we want to do right by this place. We want to leave a legacy. Maybe this isn't the right parcel or property to do what we had envisioned, because the community has a different vision. So, there are plenty examples. We're working on a project in Maunawili right now with many community partners, but Hui Maunawili Kawainui had been fighting for decades against subdivision and development of those lands, 1,000 acres in Kailua, if you can imagine. Watershed lands, native forests, traditional lo'i, and speaking of water, Maunawili Stream, 22 miles, the longest stream in Ko'olaupoko, all privately owned. And because of the pushback from the community, the landowner came to the table and said, hey, we wanna work together, and we want to sell this land for conservation. And so we've worked out a deal so that DLNR is going to get 908 acres of forested lands, including a golf course. So Uncle's question about what can we do about lands that have already been sort of damaged or destroyed or desecrated. We're talking about transferring a golf course to the state, and once the lease goes up in 2041, which is really not that long, we think it's long, but it's really, this golf course is a blip in time in terms of what that land has traditionally been used for. And the DLNR is working with the community on a vision to restore the golf course to all kinds of uses, agroforestry, native forests, there are springs there. In addition to that, there's Maunawili Trail, and so we're talking about the impact of visitors on our cultural landscapes for really just recreational use that has been, facing the negative consequences of overuse. And the state is working on a plan the trail is currently closed, and they're working on a plan to realign. That trail goes right over a complex of ancient terraces. And so we're talking about lands that have already been impacted by, many years, but trying to restore them to their pono uses. So these things are happening now in partnership, and I think this question about what is the government's role, I think the more that government can partner with community, can recognize that they're limited in terms of their resources and their expertise on Aina stewardship, the more they can cede lands and power and decision-making to communities, the more that we can have things like this happen, right? So DLNR is already working out rights of entry agreements with community groups that know how to restore and steward those lo'i on state lands. And county can do the same in terms of looking at lands that are underutilized or lying vacant to make sure that they are restored to more pono uses. So I think there's lots of opportunity to partner on housing alongside reviving our traditional cultural landscapes. And really a first exercise might just be mapping Lahaina and figuring out, okay, what lands are already in state ownership, county ownership, what lands are in private ownership, what lands are in the ownership of potential speculators or developers, and then figuring out where the opportunities are, which are most at risk and which are lands that are actually should be revived as a cultural landscape, and then parcel by parcel trying to work on buying and protecting and or putting into place stewardship agreements, rights of entry with government-owned lands. So, that's going to take a huge effort, but that could be one initial thing that the community could do, is really map out what the landscape is, what ownership looks like, where those culturally important lands are, and then figuring out a game plan from there.
Thanks, Reyna. A couple more questions from the audience before we wrap up. Are there any legislative or policy changes that need to be made in order for your vision to come to life?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
We're definitely always thinking up ideas of changes we could make that would help our cause. But yeah, we think there's already the ways and means to do a lot of what we're intending.
But if anybody out there has ideas, I'm open to changing laws.
Thank you. Okay, what would be your highest hope for how individuals can support your efforts?
A lot of different things come to mind. We really, as the community gets to a sense of some form of stability, we really want to invite engagement by other community leaders particularly, and people that maybe can help take on some of this kuleana. It's a burden, it is, but it's one that I willingly hold right now, but also very willing to pass it to someone that is in and living in Lahaina now. I hope individuals will trust us. I hope that we can develop and show ourselves to be of character and integrity, that they'll trust us, that they will support us. At some point, we're going to need finances to make this vision work, and that goes hand in hand with the trust, that they will trust us to also support these goals. They're lofty, and Lahaina land values are high. We're not blind to that. I
wanted to pick up on something that she said, that in the future when things are more stable, I'm in the west side most of the time, and what is difficult right now is all the places that we used to have. My office burned down. It was at the old Lahaina Center, and just running into people at Foodland. We don't really have that. Times is kind of like the new Foodland, but we don't really have places where we can gather as much as we used to. The Civic used to be the main place where at least county meetings are held. Now we have to pause the Disaster Recovery Center to have a community meeting at the Civic, and we use the upstairs where the air conditioning is really loud. So even if you want to live stream a meeting, it's difficult for people that are there and aren't there to hear what's going on, because the AC is like, and especially our kupuna, I see them like holding their ears. So, and there's so many meetings going on. Like tonight is the mayor's budget hearing for Lahaina. So I really wanted to not discount what Carolyn said about that stability. Plenty people are still moving every week, and just trying to sort through the insurance, trying not to get their Red Cross case closed, trying not to get their FEMA case closed, trying to figure out long-term stable housing where they could possibly cook their holiday meals. So we don't want to go too far forward without everybody being able to sit down around at the table and have that conversation with us. And so many people are not there yet. If you just think of the sheer number that, you know, up to 10,000 to 12,000 people that got displaced, over 6,800 people are still making their day-to-day life in hotels and trying to figure out where to go from there, and knowing, you know, like, when does the contract expire for this particular hotel, that the Red Cross is committed to 6 months, which is February. And so just really didn't want to discount all those things that Lahaina people are going through right in this moment, that you know, we don't have all the answers right now, but we don't want to go too far into the details without involving our community, and we don't want to be that extra burden of more choices, more huge decisions to make, when we know in their lives right now, it's everything is a hard decision.
Yeah, that's been the hardest part, really. And Tamara said it perfectly. You know, we don't want to just add one more really crippling mental burden to people that are already handling so much. But at the same time, we realize time is really of the essence. And I thought of one more thing that I think individuals can do too, is like, we're a brand new outfit where we are students learning and figuring it out, trying to get the best possible guidance and advice as we can. But we're probably going to make a mistake or two. Hopefully they're not big ones, but you know, we appreciate grace from the community and recognition that we really are doing our best. And if we do make a mistake, come help us understand it, learn from it, and find a better way. And not just, this cancel culture that we live in nowadays is rough, man. It is rough. Somebody makes one little slip up and all of a sudden they are portrayed as the devil himself. And that's just wrong. A community that's divided never stand. And if we can really, really put that kind of mana'o in our actions, in the way we treat each other, in the way we talk about people, in the things we share on social media, in the ways that we talk around our children, you know, if we can even take opportunities to teach our kids how to show grace when somebody makes a mistake, you know, that's so important. Because something like this will die sometimes because one person gets mad and goes off. And next thing you know, they're swaying the whole perception and they're changing the whole narrative. I hate that we even have to talk like this nowadays, but it's the reality. It's the world we live in. But you know what? That's why I'm not really vocal on social media, because I just don't even have the time for it. I rather like this, one-on-one. You can see me, you can talk to me. I'm a flesh and blood person, and we're gonna have an interaction, and I'm gonna treat you with respect. And that's just the way it should be, you know. And man, if we can just be that way all the time, right? Don't just get on keyboard warrior and then just, yeah, it's character assassination every day on Instagram. It's just sad. But something like this, you know, we're all humans and we're doing our best. But help us, if you see something that's questionable, reach out and talk as a human and not character assassinate. You know, that would be huge, actually, in this day and age, because it's so real and it's so unnecessary. And I would hate to see all this energy and effort be for nothing because somehow somebody, you know, gets into with a silver bullet and just takes the wind out of it. And then what? Who's really the one to suffer then, right? It's the community. Like, that's the only reason we're doing this. So just keep that in mind and yeah, try to perpetuate that in our interactions. Thank you.
Mahalo, Carolyn. Okay. Along the lines of acknowledging that everyone makes some mistakes along the way, the question is, if the easement model doesn't work out for the ʻohana, or another question that was asked is if the ownership, right, the community land trust holding that underlying fee ownership doesn't work out for the ʻohana, they want to end the easement or have the easement go away, or they want to become the owner of both the house and the underlying fee simple land. Are those options possible, or do you envision that those options could be possible?
I feel like if that's something that a family would want, we should probably put that up front, you know, as we go into the conversation. If they wanna, if they only wanna give it up for a set time, for a set amount of money, like if they wanna sell it, like say for 3 years, if that's the estimate of how long it'll take before the infrastructure is fixed, before all the debris removal happens, whatever the time frame that is quoted, because I know it's like 6 to 12 months once debris removal starts, and then there's more damage assessment after on the infrastructure, so it's not a guaranteed date certain when rebuilding would start, but going into it, that should be a consideration. Like, can you give me money to purchase this land for 3 years and hold it for me, and I'd like to come back in 3 years with it outright, or I'd like to come back and buy back in 5 years, or whatever it is. I think the best way to do it would be going in, be very clear as to what the intentions is, so that later on down the line, it's not like, oh, I want to change it or something. I mean, not saying that it couldn't be done, but it would take more effort later on. Whether you go in clear, like, this is what we want, yeah, we can accommodate that, and then it's clear from the get-go.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, in my job, we deal with agricultural easements, wetland easements, and with the nature of those easements, there's usually an option between a permanent easement or a term easement, like a 30-year easement or something. But in that case, we're usually, like in the case of wetland easements, you know, we're kind of purchasing the wetland function for that period of time. In something like this, I don't really know how that would work. I think the initial vision, and I'm just speaking my thoughts here, but the initial vision is that lands that get purchased for the trust are pretty much going to be in perpetuity, and the person selling would know that very clear. It's really not the intention to sell lands outside of a initially negotiated short-term buyback period. And that's only because of the nature of the disaster and trying to be sympathetic to where families are at. But other than that, you know, because on the flip side, people that would donate to the land trust are doing it with the intention of supporting the vision of the land trust, which is that these lands would be held in perpetuity, not sold back necessarily in 30 years. So it's a good question, and it's something that we'll definitely talk about. And ultimately, for me, as long as I'm a part of this, we're going to conduct ourselves with as much pono as possible, making sure that there's clear understanding on the part of the seller, making sure that the intentions and the purposes of the trust are well understood, and by whoever, by the donors, by the community, by people that would sell to us. So if in any way that we can make that as upright and transparent and good as possible is what we're going to do. And if we make some type of a mistake, we'll find the best way to make it right, is what I would say.
Mahalo, Carolyn. And our time is up, so I just want to mahalo our awesome panelists, Carolyn, Tamara, and Reyna. And mahalo to all of you for sharing this time with us.